Hello and welcome to your screencast. This is on assessment of the home environment, and this session is going to be next week within the Occupational Therapy Essentials module, and your session is going to be on Monday afternoon, and it's going to be facilitated by myself, Maureen and Annette. So within this session, we're wanting to think about and consider the home and its environment. We also want to think about how it impacts on performance, and using your observational skills to evaluate the home environment for safety and suitability, and almost acting as a bit of a detective. So some of the things around your observational skills aren't just going to be looking at the obvious things. There might be some very subtle things to pick up on that actually can really help guide your clinical reasoning and decision making. I want you to begin to assess a home to identify potential issues that might affect a person's function and their performance, looking out for risks and hazards in the home, and discussing factors that might impact a person's ability to actually stay in their own home. That can be really difficult when you're actually out doing a home assessment and you can see that the person's home is not fit for purpose anymore, and actually your recommendation could be at the end of it that they need to look at rehousing. That can be a really difficult thing to do, but a necessary thing to do to keep that person safe. And exploring some assessment tools. So we're going to have lots of assessment tools out for you to have a play around with and experience, and also consider how you might manage potential challenging situations when you're out visiting people in their own homes. So not all homes are equal. You're going to be visiting your career as an OT, lots of different peoples from different areas, different backgrounds, different cultures, and you know, sometimes you're walking up to that door and you don't know what you're going to find behind that door, and it's about recognising that and realising that and preparing yourself for that. And also thinking about accessibility. Some homes are really accessible, and other homes you have to climb 10 flights of stairs before you even get in the property, never mind what's inside there. So where does occupational therapy fit? So the primary goal of an OT is to enable that person to participate in activities of everyday life. So your goal is when you're going in and you're seeing that person in their home, thinking about the activities of daily living, and if they're no longer able to engage with certain aspects of ADLs, is to try and encourage and support and adapt the home potentially so they can engage with those activities. So this, you'll have all come across this model before. This is the PEO. So this is where you're thinking about the person, the occupation and the environment. This is really important when you're seeing a person in their own home. You're thinking about all these different three aspects, but you're not just thinking about them in their own component parts. You're thinking about how each overlaps with the other. So how does the occupation impact on the person? How is the environment impacting on the occupation? How is and in the middle, how they're all impacting on each other? And what the idea is that if you've got a balance in all these areas, in the middle of that, so here you'd have, I've moved on. You'd have a positive sense of well-being, both physical and mental well-being, if all these things are in a good balance. And as an OT, you're there to identify some of the bits that might be out of sync and help that person sort of realign. You can think about it from your own personal point of view as well. When things are going wrong or there's an upset in your personal life, it impacts on occupation, and it impacts on your environment and how you sort of engage with your environment. So the person, so you're thinking about health conditions and disability and functional ability, the personal characteristics of the person, so the weight, the height, the age, so emotional and behavioural characteristics, so you're thinking and considering about the mood and the motivation, the self-efficacy, the self-esteem. You've got to consider family and friends and carers, and even whether their needs are being met. I've often gone out and done home visits and ended up, it's actually been the carer that's needed my support and my help, and you end up almost, they're part of your assessment. You know, you can't go out and just assess the person, you've got to assess the carer as well. And also thinking about professional support, so whether you need to get social workers in, crisis team, community matron, and that last point about no assumptions. So don't ever go in and make any assumptions, because literally, like I've said, you don't know what you're going to find behind the door. You might have had a referral for falls assessment, but you end up looking more, like I say, at carers' needs and things like that. So you've got to go in with an open mind. So thinking about the external environment, so thinking about what local amenities are there, transport links, whether family or friends live nearby, think about access to the property and think about the surrounding area, thinking about what the gates are like, whether it's a clear width, state of repair, so is the path uneven leading up to the home that could present a tripping hazard, dropped curbs, so if you're thinking about issuing that person with a wheelchair, or is there actually access for that, think about parking, ramps, paths, external doors, steps, garden. You're thinking about everything. So as you're walking up to that person's property, you're already using your observational skills to see about, pick up on all these different things. So once you get inside, you think about the internal environment, so thinking about the corridors, the size and layout. So if they're walking with a wheeled Zimmer frame, let's say, is there actually the space to do that and manoeuvre that? Because if there isn't, that's actually going to present as even more of a hazard. Think about internal doors, so clear width, position of pipes, so you're turning into a bit of a plumber even there. Think about meters and supporting walls. If you're going to be putting grab rails or anything on a wall, you need to check that's wall substantial to do that. Think about number of rooms, so it might be that you're doing a home visit and this person's no longer able to manage up and down the stairs, so you might be thinking about converting one of the downstairs rooms into a bedroom. You've got to think about layout and proximity to bathroom and things like that. Kitchen, so think about the size of the kitchen, the table space. So when I was an OT, I used to love providing people with perching stools, but actually I found that some of the time there wasn't the room for it if you'd had a little galley kitchen, and again that can present as a hazard, so you've got to be constantly thinking about that when you're doing your assessment. Your staircase, is it curved or straight? Is there a landing or the banisters? If you're thinking about fitting a stair lift, you'd have to think about the practicalities for that, or if you think about fitting handrails. Got to be a bit of an architect. You've got to wear lots of different hats when you work as an OT. The landing, the layout and size. Bathroom, again, think about the layout and whether it's level access. Is there a shower over the bath? Is there turning area? Because you might be fitting equipment that need space to make it accessible. And thinking about bedrooms, number and size. So lots of things for you to consider when you're out there in people's homes. And like I say, it really is acting as a bit of a detective, and the observational skills are key. So as therapists, we understand that there's a relationship between the person, the occupation and the environment, and that there are ways of adapting the environment to ensure it's fit for purpose and it's the best fit for that person. So with home visits, you're looking at assessment of complex health needs, you're looking at the individual service user and the families and carers. An access visit, so home visit is with the person. An access visit is where the service user isn't there, so this might be done in preparation for a hospital discharge, let's say, or it might be done in preparation for that person going in for an operation or something where they know they're going to need adaptations, but the person isn't with you, so you're going out to assess the access, and the last part is adapting the environment. So it might be where you're fitting equipment or adaptations or modifying existing environment. So other issues to consider is that this medicalisation of the home, and some people can be very adverse to this. You've got to be very mindful that you are going into that person's home and you're suggesting all these bits of equipment that might not be very aesthetically pleasing, and you might get this response, I'm not having that in my house. And this goes back to patient choice, and if they've got the capacity to say they do not want this piece of equipment, they've got every right. You can't force them to have anything. And actually, if you do force something on them, it'll only end up in the back room or on a car boot sale. They won't keep it. They have to be part of that decision making process, that they have to have made the decision to have. I always used to say, I'll give you the advice, it's up to you what you do with it, because they have to feel they've been part of that decision making process. So this links to being professional on your visits, and you've all got the COT Code of Ethics, and in there's lots on the Healthcare Professions Council about professionalism, and we've all got our professional standards that we need to adhere to practice and determine whether it is judged to be good. So that's the standard we've got to mark ourselves against. So we want to promote and protect the interest of the service users. We want to communicate appropriately and effectively, and that might mean adapting our communication style. We need to work within the limits of their knowledge and skills. You need to delegate. You need to be respectful and maintain confidentiality, manage risks, report concerns. So it might be that you go out to somebody's homes and you've got concerns about safeguarding. I did a visit with a lady, and I had concerns about financial abuse, and that's something I had to follow up. You have to be open and honest when things go wrong. So if you do a visit and it hasn't gone to plan, it's having that open and honesty and transparency to have that kind of conversation, and just bring it up in supervision, debrief, and think about how you can make sure that doesn't happen again. But mistakes do happen. You can't do everything perfectly the first time. You've got to be honest and trustworthy, and keep your records of what you've done with the service user and the carers. One thing that's not on there that I think is important is that if you say you're going to do something, you must do it. I think service users don't, if somebody says, I'm going to ring you next week to check that that's all in place, and you don't do that, that's where the you've got to build that trust and rapport. If you say you're going to do something, you must do it. And if you don't get to do it, you ring them up and you explain why. So you've done the e-learning activity with me within your personal and professional development module, and values comes into this as well. So within the values, when you're in somebody's home, I always say you're a guest in that person's home, and it's about having respect, a non-judgmental approach, maintaining dignity at all time. Sorry, I'm going to have a drink. Apologies. Cultural sensitivity, language barriers, mental capacity, anti-oppressive, sorry my voice has gone, being trustworthy, and Equality Act. So these values are integral when you're out doing home visits, and like I say, you are a guest in that person's home. So our job is to try and help that person stay within their own environment. So you're thinking about, when you were going around the workshops and looking at the homes in the iPad house, and you're visiting the client in their home, think about what factors are influencing that person's ability to remain in their home. It might be physical health, it might be mental health. And if there are known hazards, what problems might these cause and why? And prepare yourself for potential challenging situations. So you might take a person on a home visit and they refuse to go back to hospital. What would you do in that situation? They might become very ill while you're out on the home visit. There might be transport issues. You might have irate family members. It can be a very emotive time when somebody might have been in hospital for a long time and you're doing a home visit. You might have carers who are putting obstacles and barriers in the way, and there's other things that you might come across that you can't plan for. So things to consider, and if you sort of preempt these, you're much better able to deal with them if they happen. And there's your reference list. I hope you've enjoyed that.